by suggesting that this is only a Latino problem, or that only Latino communities need to pay attention to these issues or the issues within the book, essentially removes responsibility from the school district, from the city, from the larger community, from education institutions in general, right? And so we all have a responsibility to address these inequities, and we all have a responsibility to recognize how we're perpetuating these inequities as well. And so when I hear, oh, well, this is a Latino issue, what it does then is put the blame and the responsibility back on the individual family, back on the individual community. And there was, back to some of the findings in the book, we often mention that the community-based programs like Ibero, like Puerto Rican Youth Development, like Urban League and Upward Bound were referenced over 100 times within the focus group interviews. And the students and families talked about them as safe spaces. They talked about the staff in these programs as members of their extended family who they felt comfortable coming to, who they felt supported by. But one of the things that we were concerned about was that people would interpret that as, oh, these community programs are supporting the students and they're doing okay because the programs are there, versus recognizing that the schools still had responsibility to serve those students in those same supportive ways, that it shouldn't just be up to the community-based programs to provide those resources for students.
Well, Hilda, I know you feel very strongly about this, and you've been advocating for years and years to improve education among Latino students. You work with people of all backgrounds in this community. So what would your message be to members of the non-Latino community?
You know, this is very important to me, and I felt very strongly about it. And number one, because I think that everybody have the right to have access to quality education. Number two is because Latinos are a growing market. And if we don't prepare our kids, this community, the whole nation, is not going anywhere. We will not be able to compete in the global market.
I think this is really important because there is a lot of inequity and segregation in K through 12 schools, and I think it is often dismissed that we are in no better of a place than we were 60 years ago with Brown v. Board, contrary to belief. So the equitable education and desegregating schools is really important to the overall global, I would even say, future of this world. And so if we are segregating students and they are not receiving the resources and the access that they need, and they're also being segregated into racial and ethnic communities versus more diverse and resourceful places, then it affects all of us. So I think this is much bigger, right, than a Rochester issue. This is much bigger than these smaller scale issues, because it involves so many different people. And I think it is a disservice to the Latino community, to all communities, to segregate children and not provide them the resources that they need, because then they will not be able to become prosperous adults. And that's our future. This is our future that we are waging in. And so we need students to be able to learn and to have a quality education, as Hilda said, in order to have a future, because it is unfair. And we know that the Latino population is really growing in this country, but it is not being addressed in the proper manner.
So I guess one of the things that we need to understand is that the Latino community has a specific history in the U.S., and it may parallel with other groups, but there are disconnects. And so we have to understand those forces that has constructed the opportunities for Latinos within the U.S. A lot of times people will say, well, you know, we need to meet the needs of all students of color. If you look at Rochester, you know, the outcomes for African Americans, Asian American students are low, and white students do a little bit better, but overall the outcomes are not high. But we also know there are specific needs for Latino students that have to be addressed, and by focusing on everybody, kind of one size fits all approaches do not meet the needs of all students. There's a quote that I use in the book because there's a question about, you know, if these one size fits all policies worked, then we would see that the needs of Latino students, we wouldn't see these disparities. And so we need to understand the specific factors that position Latino students and the factors that create barriers for Latino students in very different ways. One of the things that we talk about in the book is this whole issue of circular migration for Latino students. You know, whether they're going back to the island, they're coming here on the mainland, moving within the states, or even if kids were born here, they have family members in Puerto Rico, and so we need to understand how that impacts the structural opportunities for kids. And so we can't say that that's the same for other groups and communities of color. There may be similarities, but we still need to understand the kind of the historical context of different groups and how that shapes the reality of educational opportunity.
One of the, oh, sorry,
No, go ahead.
I'm much more articulate.
Obviously, these issues that Latino students and families are facing, they're long-term issues. But what would you say would be some short-term solutions, or at least ways to start addressing some of these problems?
So I guess one of the key issues is having adequate bilingual services, adequate academic supports, rigorous academic programs for Latino students. I mean, one of the things that Tom Noel and I write about in the book is the inequitable access to advanced placement courses. And so we need to make sure that Latino students are in school with robust opportunities for them to get access to rigorous content that's going to prepare them not only to get into college, but to succeed. Because you can have kids graduating from the city school district in the top of their class, but are they really prepared for the majors that they're interested in? If they're interested in science, engineering, technology, and they haven't had rigorous classes, including curriculum and AP classes, then they're blocked from getting access or doing well in the gateway courses to move into those STEM fields. And so I think it's a balancing of having bilingual program services, culturally relevant teachers, you know, having curriculum that allows students to understand their history infused with the core content. So it's a number of things that need to come together in order to provide students with robust opportunity to tap into the assets within the community.
Tom and Dr. Harris both touched on this idea of the segregation that's happening within schools currently. If you take AP classes as one example, or even the college centers, right? The college prep centers that are in 2 of the high schools right now, East and I can't remember the other high school that it's in. But if we think about where our Latino students are, they're at Monroe. And so if there's not the college preparation opportunities at Monroe High School, if there's not AP opportunities at Monroe High School, if there's not IB opportunities there, their opportunities are structured in very different ways when it comes to enhanced academic support and enhanced academic opportunities at the high school level and in preparation for the next step into college.